Hi everyone, it's Mary from Joyful and Mary Quilting, and today I'm going to be giving you a tutorial for our quilting tip, and I'll be demonstrating how to use the 8-inch Curvy log cabin tool by Creative Grids. I'm going to guide you through the process step by step of assembling this block, but I'm going to share a few additional tips that I found helpful along the way. This tool creates a perfect block. It adds a curvy look to your quilt pattern, and it's really accurate and it's really easy to use once you get the hang of it. So follow along and let's get started. To follow along, first of all, you're going to need the ruler. This is the 8-inch Curvy log cabin trim tool. Comes in a couple of different sizes. We're going to be doing the 8-inch block. You'll also need some fabric strips. I've used a background fabric. I've used that for my narrow strips. I've used a print fabric for my wide strips. You'll need a 2-inch strip for this center square of your background fabric or whatever fabric you're using for your narrow strips. You will also need 2 1/4 inch at least in width strips for the wide strips. They can be wider than 2 1/4 inches, but they can't be more narrow than 2 1/4 inches. You also will need some extra tools. When it comes to assembling this block, you'll need some kind of a ruler, a straight edge, in addition to the ruler that we're going to be using, the trim tool. You'll need your rotary cutter, cutting mat, iron, pressing mat. I also like to use my pressing marker to flatten out my seams. I have Mary Ellen's Best Press in here. If you aren't familiar with this particular technique, there is a video. The link is in the description to the video. It tells you what it is and how to use it. I like to use a stiletto when I am feeding my strips under my sewing machine. It just keeps everything straight. You'll need a pencil, 0.7 millimeters, what I use, mechanical pencil, that I will be marking my dots in order to create my initial square. So those are basically what you need. In addition, you'll also need some pins. Now, before we dive in, let me show you a few of the blocks that I've already finished so that you can see the beautiful curvy effect the tool creates. If you like, you can scan the QR code that's actually on the instruction sheet that comes with the ruler. And there's also an official video that Creative Grids puts out walking you through the process. So with that video, with my video, and with the instruction sheet, you are good to go. Make sure that you follow along with the instruction sheet as you are making the blocks and as you're following along with me. I rely heavily on the graphics that are included in this sheet, and I keep it clipped to my ruler all the time so I don't lose track of it. You can see also on this block, I've actually used the print fabric for my wide strips on these 4 blocks, but then I switched it and I used the print fabric for my narrow strips on this block, which when you put it together, mix and match, you can do all kinds of fun patterns with this particular block. There are books that have been created, there are pattern books out there that actually have many ways to use the Curvy log cabin tool. So let's go ahead and I'm going to walk you through the process of creating this block. I know you're going to love it. Just be patient with yourself. Make sure that you check everything along the way. Eventually, it's going to come naturally to you, but it's a little confusing at the very beginning, especially with the beginning square. So I want to get you through and over that part so that you can create lots and lots of beautiful blocks. So let's go. I have all my pieces of fabric cut for this block, and then I have my supplies here on my table. Now, when it comes to the fabric, you need to decide which fabric you are going to be using for your wide strips and which fabric you're going to be using for your narrow strips. Whatever fabric you choose, however you're going to do it, because it works both ways, we are going to be cutting our wide strips at least 2 1/4 inches. We are going to be cutting our narrow strips at least 1 1/2 inches. You can make them, bigger if you're using scraps. It doesn't matter. They can be larger, but they can't be any smaller. The only difference is this center square, and we're going to call this center square in this particular layout that I'm following. This square needs to match my background fabric narrow strips. So I'm using background fabric for this particular strip. You need a 2-inch strip for this one. I'm going to do all my blocks the same, so I want to have a 2-inch strip by width of fabric that I'll just keep cutting off until I'm finished. So let's go ahead and show you how we use our ruler in order to do that. So the first thing is I have that 2-inch strip. It was 2 inch by width of fabric, and I'm going to cut it using just your regular ruler. I'm going to cut it into a 2 inch by 2 inch square. So here we go. And again, save that piece for whatever blocks you're doing. Now, this is crucial that you have this positioned exactly as it shows in the instructions. So you'll want to take your instructions. I've got mine clipped to my ruler, and this does walk you through step by step all of the instructions to create the block. There's a few things missing, and that's what I hope I can pick up for you here. It starts here, getting started, and then it continues on inside, and there's just, like I say, detailed instructions for the block assembly, and then it gives you some other options on what you can do to make it fun. So there's different layouts and positions. You just have to follow that as you do. We're just going to do a basic block with our wide strips being our colored strips and our narrow strips being our background fabric. So we're going to start here where it says getting started. Our center square, we need a precise 1 3/4 inch square. So it says the seam guide has a dashed line that you can use. That's a little tip here. What we're going to do is take the square, that 2 inch square that we've cut, we want it to be wrong side up because we're going to mark on the wrong side. So we'll place this here. And then this part of our ruler where it says seam guide center square, it has 4 holes in there. We're going to take advantage of those 4 holes, and we're going to just place, center it as best as you can, and we're going to mark the holes. Now, you can't easily see this on the camera, but there is a dashed white line on your ruler that goes around here. That is going to give us that correct measurement when it comes to the 1 3/4 inches. So I'm going to take and do this, and this, and this, and this. Now I have those corners marked. Take advantage of having everything positioned, and I'm going to trim off these 2 edges. Now I know that I have half of the block right. Flip the block around, flip the square around, and then line up those edges that I just cut with that dashed white line. So you want the dashed white line to be right on the fabric. We don't want it to be off the fabric. We want it to be right on the fabric. Then if you look, your dots that you made are going to be in the holes, and then we're just going to trim off the other 2 edges. Now we have that perfect 1 3/4 inch base that we're going to build our block on. So this is, again, wrong side up. The next thing, if you look at your instructions, we're going to be creating this particular section. So we have our square, this is right side up, and we're going to take our first color that we've decided to use. I'm going to use blue, and as you can see here, we need a blue square underneath. So we have the center square, that's our background fabric, and we need that blue square underneath. So I like to, just put it exactly as in this instruction. After a while, it'll become commonplace for you. You won't have to refer to it, but this is really helpful. We're going to take this and put it right sides together. I want a little extra on this side, a little extra on this side. Put a pin in it if you want. It's a little piece. Sometimes they can slip. And then I'm going to take my straight edge, and I'm just going to cut about 1/4 inch extra. I just want to make sure that everything is going to line up right. Probably a good idea to cut that before you put the pin in there so that it doesn't wobble. Now we're going to take and sew a 1/4 inch seam. These are the dots that are basically our guide. We know that that's what we want to do. So if you've got it marked on your sewing machine, which I do, I don't have any trouble with it. I just sew my 1/4 inch seam the same way throughout the block. If you feel like you need to mark that, you can do that. So go ahead and sew on this side. Then we are going to press toward the newly added piece using our pressing marker, and I'll show you that in just a second. So I have sewn on that 1/4 inch marking, and I'm going to press by using my pressing marker. You can use it on either side here, or you can do it, open it up and do it on this side, either way, and then we're going to press it toward that newly added piece. Okay, now you can see in our instructions right here, we have these 2 pieces completed, the C, the center, and that blue piece underneath. Now we need to add a piece to the side. Now I don't like this piece right here on here, so I'm going to trim that off first, just so that I have an even edge. So I've turned it upside down. I've lined up a line on my ruler, and I'm going to trim that piece off, just like I say, so I have that straight edge. Now I am ready to add another piece to this side. I'm going to put a little extra on that end, and then I'm going to trim it off a little extra on the opposite end. Now, if you want, again, to pin, go ahead. Gonna pin here. Now this edge is, needs to be trimmed. We know that, we will do that. Go ahead and sew that 1/4 of an inch along that edge. So we have sewn that piece. You need to make sure you set your seam by just placing your iron on top. That just makes those threads sink into the fabric, makes it a little flatter. We're going to press toward the newly added piece. So I'm going to take my pressing marker. If you don't have one, that's okay. I like to use it. And we're going to press this direction. Okay, now let's take a look and make sure we did it right. We've got the C centerpiece here, we have a square here, and we have a strip here. So we are good to start our first trim. We'll take our ruler, and as it shows here, we're going to trim it twice. We want to line up that center square seam guide with the 2 edges, because we're going to trim this side and we're going to trim this side. Now this should be trimmed already, because remember, we worked really hard to make sure that that was exactly right. So we want to make sure that these lines are inside. We don't want them on top of this fabric. We want it inside, and then everything should match up on the other 2 sides. So we're going to trim here and here. Does it look the same? It looks the same. So we are now ready to add to the opposite sides of our center square. We've already done this. We're going to add the narrow strips to the opposite side. So the first one we're going to add is here across the top. So I have my narrow strip of background fabric, it's long, and I'm going to place it right sides together. Again, a little extra on each end. And I call it kind of sloppy cut. You just, some people call it rough cut. You can just cut it without a ruler. Set that aside, and then I'm going to pin this here. Whoops. Some people don't pin. Totally up to you. And we're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam here. Press it towards that newly added piece. Okay, so we'll take a look at this particular section. We can see that we have added the piece across the top. Now we need to add down the side, but needs some trimming here before we can do that. I like to have a trim side. Not everybody does that either. They just add the piece. I want to see where I'm adding my piece all the way up. So I trim that off. Now we are going to right sides together, add a piece to this side. A little extra on the top, a little extra on the bottom, pin, and then sew that 1/4 inch seam. Same thing like we did before. Use your pressing marker if you have one. Press that seam flat, press it toward the newly added piece. One thing you want to be careful of is you don't want these to be too long, only because, wasted fabric, of course, but also this can kind of get curled up when you're pressing it open, and this way, when they're a little bit shorter, they tend to just go with the remainder of the strip. So now, if you look at this, how does it look? Let's check it with our graph here. We have our short strip here, we have our long strip here, and now we need to use our ruler again, and we are going to trim it off. So this is our center square, and now round 1 is completed. So we're going to trim round 1. Now the ruler actually has narrow round 1, narrow round 2, flip it around, and then we have wide round 1 and wide round 2. Then we have round 3 that just uses 1 square, and that's the end. So we are at narrow round 1. Whatever strips you have across the top and down the right side, narrow, That's what we're going to use here. And our center square is going to fit right in that square. So let's do that. And there's all kinds of ways on the ruler to line everything up so that you don't get crooked. That's the problem. The block can get crooked in a snap if you're off just a little bit. So look at, I can line it up here, I can line it up here, I can line it up here, and then my center square is lined up as well. And like I say, that is so important there, that we get that just perfect in there. So we're going to trim this piece. And then we flip the block around and flip the ruler around, okay? So now we are going to take wide round 1 and put that in the center square. Line up these edges, all the edges, line up that center. Make sure everything is good. There, we've got that lined up, this lined up, and we're going to trim the other edge. And we have finished round 1. So now that we have actually completed trimming round 1 with our narrow strips and trimming round 1 continued on the next page with our wide strips, let's double check and make sure we did it right before we move on. This is what it's supposed to look like. Okay, so let's look at our block. We have the center square here. We have a wide strip, the shorter one, here. We have the longer wide strip here. We have the shorter narrow strip here. We have the longer narrow strip here. So it looks just like that. We are ready to move on to round 2. Round 2 goes together much easier. This was the hard one. Now all we're going to do is we're just going to continue adding strips. We're going to add a colored strip here, a wide colored strip here, a wide colored strip here, a narrow background strip here, and a narrow background strip here. You can tell if you're doing it right if you continue to create these V's along the block, V, V, V. If you're not, if you got one up in the wrong area, then you know that you've made a mistake. So we're going to start with our next color, which I'm going to just use a pink. And the first one that we're going to do is take a look at whatever the last piece was that you added on the right and turn that to the top, okay? So at the top we have the last piece that we added. And then to that right side, we're going to add our next piece. So again, we're going to just trim that off. I didn't do that very straight, but it doesn't matter because we're going to trim it again. And we're going to put our pins in. Now we don't trim these again when we do the complete block trim until after we've completed a round. We still do some little trimming here and there so that it's easier to add the strips. So I'm going to show you how to do that. This is round 2. So let's sew that 1/4 inch strip here. We're going to press it toward the wide colored strip. So there I have done that. I have pressed it toward that particular piece that I just added, the newly added piece. Now I want to trim this off because I know my next piece is going to go here. It's going to go to make that V, not here. It's going to go here. We want to have it next to the previous colored fabric wide strips that we used. So we got to get rid of that. So let's line this up on our cutting mat. Any straight edge will work. I like to line it up here, just make sure that I'm not getting my cutting off kilter. And now I'm ready to add my other pink strip. You don't have to move anything, it's right there waiting for you. Cut that one a little close there. And pin. Again, I pin these because they can move and I just don't want it to go crooked on me. 1/4 inch seam pressed toward that piece of fabric, the wide strip. I have added that strip. Remember, we want the last added strip to be on the top so that we can trim the side, line everything up, across and down so that it's straight. Lots of places with a log cabin block to line things up, and we'll trim off that extra piece. We are now ready to add our next pieces, which are the narrow. We're not done with our round 2 yet until we've added those narrow strips. So let's put these right sides together, a little hanging off the end. And then same process. It gets easy. You know, once you start going, you can really go quick. It's that first one. You want to make sure that you don't do it backwards. And I did it backwards so many times before I finally got it right. And I find that the best way to do it is just to follow along with that instruction sheet. Use it as your guide and check every step as you go along. So let's do that 1/4 inch. I'm gonna mark those. You can see how flat my block lays, and I know it's because of this pressing solution on the seam. There we go. There's my newly added piece. We want it across the top, and then we want to trim off these extra edges to complete that first strip. Then we have one more to add on this side before round 2 is ready to be trimmed. So I've cut those. So let's take this piece, a little bit hanging over the edge, a little bit hanging over the edge, and pin in place. Again, we are almost finished with round 2. So that 1/4 inch, press it toward the newly added piece. And there I've added that piece. We don't need to trim it up because we're going to do the round 2 trim. So what do we have over here? These are our narrow strips. So let's look for narrow round 2. And that center square always comes back. That is our guide. That's why that one needed to be so perfect, because we use it every single time. Line up here, line up here. Make sure that everything looks good. Oops. And it does. And then we're going to trim off the narrow strips. Flip our block, flip our ruler, find our wide round 2, go to our center square, which isn't really in the center anymore, but it still is our guide. And we want to make sure everything is lined up. Looks really good. And we're going to trim off the wide side. And we have completed round 2. So what do? We check to make sure it's right, because if it's not, it's better to catch it now. So here is our completed round 2. We have our center square. We have the wide rectangle beneath it. We have the longer wide next to it, which we do. And then our short pink, our long pink of the wide, our short background, and our long background of the narrow, our short, and our long along the edge. So round 2 is perfect. We're ready for the last round. And for that particular round, I am going to use my green fabric. We're ready to add our next piece, which, if you keep in mind that we have the last added piece across the top, we're going to place our final, my green, I'm using the green fabric, our final round piece on the right side and pin it in place. I'm going to use 3 pins this time because our strips are getting longer and I don't want that middle part to wiggle out of the way. Cut this. So a 1/4 inch, press toward the newly added piece. So there's our newly added piece. It goes across the top so that we can trim the edge. And now we are ready to add, we're ready to add that final wide fabric strip. I'm going to pin it 3 places. And then this piece will still work for a centerpiece on a future block. So we're just going to trim that off and save it. So that 1/4 inch, press toward the newly added piece. There we have added this piece. So that's going to be across the top so that we can trim that edge. Line up anywhere we can. Here, here, here. And trim. And we are ready to begin adding those final narrow strips. I'm going to place this here. 3 pins, make sure that we're off the edge at the top a little bit. The bottom. Trim that off. Pin in the middle again, so 1/4 inch, same old, same old. Press toward the newly added piece. There we have that piece. Turn it to the top. Like I say, this, after a while, you're just going to be doing this without any thought. But the first couple of times can be a little difficult, and that's where the video and that instruction sheet makes a huge difference. The instruction sheet doesn't give you all the steps, so that's where you want to follow along with the video for the first couple of times so you don't waste a block. We're going to take our final piece, right sides together, pin 3 places, trim off that bottom piece, and do our final seam, press toward the newly added piece. So we have added that final strip. Now it's time to trim. Remember that we want to make sure that this is our reference square. We have our narrow strips top right, and we're going to use our ruler round 3. Round 3 is in white, so we know this is kind of a different one, and I'll show you why. This is our finish up. It doesn't move. We don't flip our block to a different square. We use this particular square for the entire trimming. So we can go along and we can look and see how beautifully accurate our block is all around the edge. We've got just really, really good seams, but this is what's going to make it 8.5 inches. So even if these are a tiny bit off anywhere in the center, we've got that 8.5 inch square finished. So I'm going to trim this side, trim across the top. Now we do need to flip it around. I'm going to show you another option on this, my rotating mat. And I really like this. This is my Martelli mat. I really like using it because then I really don't have to move anything. I can just flip it around since this block is square to the ruler. So I have my round 3 right here. I've got everything lined up. Here, here, all around the edges. I've already trimmed this side because I did that on my straight mat. But then all I have to do is this. And I turn it around and I trim it again. So there we have that beautiful curvy log cabin block that is absolutely perfect all the way around. I love it. I love the trim tool. You can look at your instructions at the very end just to make sure that everything is correct, which if I look at it, it looks the same. I'm happy with my finished block. I'm happy with my trim tool. I hope you are too. I am always trying to be joyful, but I will always be merry. Thanks so much for watching.